Why would you put your big body on top of a child like that?
Porter County Sheriff's Office says they were called to the 200 block of Falcon Way in Liberty Township on April 25th, 2024 for a medical emergency and found Dakota unresponsive and lying on the ground. He had bruising on his lower back and chest. The child was rushed to an area hospital for treatment but died. Investigators say video from a doorbell camera showed a 340-pound Wilson holding the 91-pound child down while she says he was acting out.
She's taken a big part of us away from us, but yet she got to live her life for another 9 months after his death.
And as the family says, today's sentencing will help them try to move on. It can't dull the pain of the loss of a child.
It gives us a little closure, but we'll never heal. He will always be missed. He's always in our hearts and our minds.
Amid their ongoing grief, there was justice for the family and friends of 10-year-old Dakota Levi Stevens, moments after a Porter County, Indiana judge sentenced his foster mother to prison for causing his death.
We are pretty happy with the results. It doesn't bring him back, but it's a start.
49-year-old Jennifer Wilson was immediately taken into custody to begin serving her 6-year sentence imposed by Judge Michael Bergenson with the Indiana Department of Corrections, with 1 year suspended and to be served on probation. After first declaring her innocence, Wilson pled guilty to reckless homicide in October.
Just wanted to say thank you to the courts for listening to us.
A large contingent of the victim's family and friends were present during the over 3-hour-long sentencing hearing, where the former foster mother addressed the court and asked for leniency. Voice trembling and through tears, she read a prepared statement saying in part, "I'm not here expecting forgiveness. If the roles were reversed, I can't say I would be able to forgive the person responsible for the death of my loved one. I am deeply saddened and sorry for my role in this horrible tragedy."
Man, they only gave this lady 6 years. That's like a slap on her wrist considering what happened. Y'all see it, man. That is some crazy stuff. 340-pound woman crushes a 10-year-old who is only 91 pounds. That's almost 4 times his weight. And where on the boy she was sitting, holy shit. Life in prison, dog. Look at how big she is. And for her to be that big and all that weight spread out, you know she not tall. You know it's all condensed into a ball. This what they mean when they say big people don't act like they big as hell. I'm just gonna read an article from the International Business Times because it has a lot of detail pertaining to what happened that day. And when you hear or read this, man, this is brutal. Evil 340-pound foster mom sits on 10-year-old and suffocates him to death. A 340-pound, 49-year-old foster mother has been sentenced to 6 years in prison for suffocating 10-year-old Dakota Levi Stevens to death. In October, Jennifer Lee Wilson admitted to reckless homicide, confessing that she had fatally restrained her foster son in April last year by lying on his torso for approximately 5 minutes, causing fatal injuries. The incident occurred in Liberty Township, Northwest Indiana, on April 25th. According to court documents, Dakota had been placed in Wilson's care by Lake County Child Protective Services on April 5th. She ain't even had his kid for 20 days and she crushed him, and she only got 6 years for it. Police officials revealed that prior to the tragedy, Dakota had sought help from a neighbor alleging that he was being abused by his foster parents. The tragic final hours of Dakota. The day the tragedy occurred, Dakota ran to a neighbor's house telling the homeowner that his foster parents were abusive and had stopped him from contacting his caseworker. The child begged the neighbor to adopt him. After the neighbor promised to call police, Wilson arrived at the house and dragged Dakota back to their home. Once back at their home in Liberty Township, Indiana, Wilson became infuriated when Dakota refused to follow her commands. According to Wilson's statements to the police, Dakota had been acting up after an argument over chores. She later claimed he became agitated when she told him he could go outside to play after finishing his chores. When he stormed off, Wilson decided to track him down. After finding him with the neighbor, Wilson stated she forced Dakota into her car and took him back to the house, where she alleged he tried to run away again. Wilson told investigators, "I did not remember whether I tackled the boy or if we both fell to the ground. However, my intention was to hold him." What happened next was deadly. Wilson pinned Dakota down, laying on his midsection for several minutes. She video chatted with Dakota's caseworker during this time and even spoke to her husband through a doorbell camera, all while her foster child was crying beneath her. The caseworker attempted to calm Dakota, but Wilson continued holding him down. Wilson, who weighs 340 pounds, remained on top of Dakota for 7 minutes, during which Dakota continued to cry out for help. All the while, this beautiful boy was crying for his life. Crying for his life. The defendant is just completely oblivious that she had just killed her foster child, Judge Bergerson remarked during the sentencing. After several minutes, Wilson claimed she became out of breath due to her weight and got off of Dakota. It was only then that she realized something was wrong. She then rolled Dakota over and it appeared his eyelids were pale, the court documents state. It was at this point that Wilson began CPR and called 911. When deputies arrived at the house at around 3:37 p.m., they found Dakota unresponsive, not breathing, and without a pulse. He had visible bruising on his lower neck and chest area. Despite efforts to resuscitate him, Dakota was airlifted to South Bend Memorial Hospital where he was later pronounced dead. An autopsy determined that Dakota had suffered severe organ and tissue damage and that he had died from mechanical asphyxiation. The only time I ever hear about children suffocating is when we're talking about parents rolling over on their baby while they're sleeping, which is also horrific. But imagining a 340-pound human sitting on top of a 90-pound 10-year-old while he screams for his life until it all just stops eventually? What the fuck? I hope we all agree that you do not put your body on top of a child in any manner. I think people underestimate how easy it is for somebody to be crushed. I'm a full-size 6'2", 200-pound grown man. I'm slim because I'm a decent height, so maybe it don't help. But like, my little sister couldn't put her whole body on top of me, my chest area, my neck and stuff, without me feeling mad uncomfortable like I'm about to suffocate. I can't imagine a freaking 90-pound child taking on a 340-pound woman. And y'all know women tiny, all condensed meat. She didn't even have him for 3 weeks, yo. And the fact that he was running to a neighbor's house saying that he was being abused. I know troubled children going through the foster care system are often stereotyped, but I gotta give them the benefit of the doubt. In my experience, kids don't lie like that. In his ruling, Judge Bergerson expressed disbelief at the callousness shown by Wilson. Obviously, she applied more force than was necessary, and that created the circumstances that led to his death, he said. Dakota's aunt, Anna Parrish Parker, spoke in court about the devastating impact of his death on the family. She said that she had once cared for Dakota and that his death could have been avoided. Parrish Parker revealed how Dakota's mother lost custody due to drug addiction, and his father died from a drug-related infection. While she was able to adopt Dakota's younger sister, the state removed Dakota from her care after she refused to increase therapy. She also shared that the family was unaware of his passing until they received a Facebook message from one of the foster parents. Seeing your family suffer and knowing you can't do anything is very despairing, Parrish Parker told the court. Wilson's defense and foster care history. Wilson addressed Dakota supporters at her sentencing, acknowledging they could never forgive her. I cannot ask you for forgiveness because I cannot say for certain I would forgive someone who was responsible for the death of my loved one, she said. You lost him all over again. I am deeply saddened for my role in this horrible tragedy. Wilson's husband, Robert, explained she was holding down Dakota by his legs due to concerns he might harm himself as he had previously. The couple had planned to relinquish their foster license but agreed to take Dakota in after providing respite care 2 years ago. Wilson, who had been a licensed foster parent since 2017, claimed that Dakota's behavior had been challenging and she feared he might hurt himself. She also said that she was trying to control his aggression. However, the video footage from her doorbell camera contradicted her statements, showing that Dakota was visibly crying and pleading for help as she held him down. After the incident, Wilson's foster care license was reportedly revoked on June 30th. Dakota's obituary, which referred to him by his middle name, highlighted his love for the outdoors, particularly his bug hunting adventures where he caught insects and frogs. He loved to use his imagination, his family wrote, and had a very creative imagination. Personally, for me, I've never heard anything like this before. Foster parents often get a bad rap for one main reason, and that is abuse. I am personally inclined to believe there is some truth to what Dakota told his neighbors. It had only been 3 weeks, but I can believe it. I am not saying that all foster parents are abusive parents, by the way. I don't believe that to be true. But I think that foster children are some of the easiest children to exploit. I also think this woman deserves really life in prison prison for this incident, and she has to go on a really clean diet to mitigate any risk of her dying prematurely because of health reasons, as she is like 340 pounds. You don't meet a lot of people that grow old at that weight. As I said earlier, foster kids are stereotyped as being troubled kids, which is true in a lot of different ways. And I think it comes a time in a child's life where they have to try and understand their life, and they have to cope. Their growth process is crippled by the fact that they don't have their biological mother and father taking care of them. They have to jump from house to house. And I don't know how often, but sometimes these parents are in it for the wrong reasons. I mean, money. And they don't really care for these children, and abuse can occur. The thing is, a foster parent is supposed to know what they're getting into. They know they're taking care of a less fortunate child that chances are comes from a family that deals with drug abuse. The child might be orphaned. They're supposed to be mentally, physically, and emotionally equipped to handle these situations. You should be prepared for a child to act up, as Wilson put it. If you have to restrain a child, you should be in good enough shape to do it without sitting on their neck and crushing them. I'm not saying it's not stressful, but they pay you to take care of these children. There ought to be some very strict requirements when it comes to the parents. I don't even know how sitting on a child would come from your brain. It just sounds like something you literally pulled out of your ass. I just read it and I can't remember whether it said the neighbors did or did not call the police. All I know is that Dakota told the neighbors he was being abused. They said they would call the police. Wilson went and got him, took him home, and he supposedly started acting up and tried to leave when Wilson decided to restrain him, sit on him, and get on the phone with his caseworker until the boy was crushed and suffocated. One thing that article didn't point out was how severe the damage was. It says here he suffered organ and tissue damage, liver and lung hemorrhaging, and other injuries. What she did was incredibly negligent and cruel, and she didn't even know the damage she was causing. I think Dakota was telling the neighbors the truth, because no functioning, rational adult would ever do something like this. So if I'm running with the statement that she's abusive, there's a few questions now, because she's a foster parent. And like I said, foster parents are often stereotyped for being abusive, even if it's not all of them. It is something that you hear. For me, there's two questions. Why go get a foster care license and go through all the steps to be able to take care of children if you're just going to abuse them? And then what are the requirements to be a foster parent? Because it seemed like they just picking anybody. I searched for the answer to my first question, and this is what I found. According to the Children's Bureau, neglect is the most common form of mistreatment faced by children in foster care. It accounts for 74% of reported cases. Neglect is followed by physical abuse, which occurs in 17% of cases. Next is sexual abuse, which is 10.6% of cases, and psychological abuse falls last at 6.8% of cases. This is only reported cases. This does not take into account unreported cases, obviously. Now, when you read that and you hear that neglect is one of the most common forms of abuse foster children face, why would you take in kids just to neglect them? I think the number one answer to that is that they don't really care about the kids. They get paid for this. And honestly, they get paid a good amount of money for having children in their home. I live in California, so I'm going to speak about California. In California, for each kid, you get $1,000 to $2,600 per month. Now, I don't know how foster care works. I don't know if it needs to be one parent or two parent. All I know is that if you get 3 children in there, you have $3,000 a month. And that still leaves room for somebody else to go to work full time. If you're making $2,600 a month per child for 3 children and still have somebody to go to work, you're making a decent living, even with the needs of children. And regardless of what time period you're in, my parents made it far with 3 children and much less capital. If they are letting anybody become foster parents, which it seems like in this situation, I could imagine people would take advantage of that and they couldn't give a rat's ass about the well-being of a child. They just want that check. That's neglect out the way. Now we have to get into the fact that it's weirdos out here. There are child predators out here. If you look up the child offender map, do they even still got that? I don't know. But if you look up that map and it's there, you would be highly surprised at the amount of predators that are near you. That's only those that have been caught, and it's a lot that haven't been caught. 1000% I see child predators exploiting the foster care system, becoming foster parents to get a vulnerable child in their home, to get a troubled child in their home, a child with low self-esteem. They would 1000% be exploited, coerced, gaslit, that's a word, all sorts of other manipulation tactics to keep a child quiet. And like I said, these are vulnerable children. They are easy to take advantage of and exploit. That gets an aspect of physical and psychological abuse out the way. Many people don't even recognize that they are abusive, and I think that is huge. People have gotten beaten like slaves and they feel like they turned out just fine. Whole time, everybody close to them can realize that they're suffering from many traumas: physical, emotional, psychological, mental. It's the same as psychological. You get it. They suffer from trauma and they can't recognize it. They feel like it's normal. And so when they have children in their control, they'll often pass on the same damage that was done to them and not even realize how damaging they're being. That accounts for psychological damage, physical damage, and neglect. And it's not just putting your hands on children, it's isolation tactics, verbal abuse, things of many different natures. You could argue that, oh, they don't understand that they're being abusive, so they shouldn't be held accountable for that, which is a crazy thing. I hope nobody thinks like that, because the truth is, you're an adult, and somewhere along the line, you have to recognize your traumas, your shortcomings, and you must improve. Last thing that makes sense to me is that on the case that, children do decide to speak out about their abuse, it's easy to hide all that behind the fact that this kid is a foster kid. They're stereotyped as being troubled children. You can argue that a kid is acting out and speaking out based on the trauma that they had from a previous home they came from. It gets super duper deep. All this is coming from articles and people's anecdotal experiences on forums and stuff like that. Quora, Reddit, you get it. It's so much I really could not imagine. I want to move now into my second question. What are the requirements for becoming a foster parent? I'm going to read a Google AI overview. It's not from anywhere specific, but let's go. To be a foster parent, you generally need to be at least 21 years old, pass a background check, demonstrate financial stability, have a safe home, and complete a home study and required training. Here's a more detailed breakdown of the requirements. General requirements. Age, be at least 21 years old. Background checks, undergo criminal background checks, including fingerprinting to ensure a safe environment for children. Financial stability, demonstrate a regular source of income and the ability to provide for a child's basic needs, though you don't need to be wealthy. Home safety, ensure your home meets safety standards and is suitable for a child. Home study, complete a home study, which is an assessment process and report that evaluates your ability to provide a safe and healthy environment. Training, attend required foster parent orientation and training. References, provide character references. U.S. citizen or permanent resident, be a U.S. citizen or permanent resident. Additional considerations, family stability, demonstrate a stable family environment. Parenting experience, while not always a requirement, parenting experience can be helpful. Health, foster parents should be in good health. Space, have a spare bedroom or space for a child. Caring approach, have a caring and compassionate approach to childcare. And all of these vary from state to state, so you have to check what's important in your state. Now, if you were to read this on paper, it sounds like they're doing a great job screening foster parents. But I know better, and hopefully you do too. Like I said, on paper, this will look great, but I do think that in a practical sense, I don't know how the application process works, but I feel as though she should have been denied the ability to be a foster parent in the first place. I think there ought to be trials where they're dealing with these foster students in high stress situations to see how they react and how they would parent, and not just like a one-day thing. I think you ought to take a month, maybe 2. You have to do this at this time every single week. I almost want to say you need some type of experience dealing with children and taking care of children. Maybe not a parent, maybe a nanny, being a teacher. That probably sounds like wishful thinking, but I think that the screening process, even on paper, now that I'm thinking about it, I don't think that it's good enough. Can't believe she sat on a child's neck and chest until their lung hemorrhaged. Literally suffocated that child. I can't believe she only got 6 years for this type of negligence and this type of physical harm. I don't know, crazy stuff. Like I said, I had never heard nothing like this before. That's my little 2 cents on the situation though. Let me know what what y'all think about the situation. I'm already knowing, and I'm hoping that everybody feel like this is absolutely insane. That's it though. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll be back with another one soon.